Before you can break free, you must accept that your mind is under attack. Every morning, millions of us sit down at our screens with fierce intent, hungry to build, execute, and change our lives. Yet, by sunset, we are drained. We have nothing to show for our time except a dozen open tabs and a lingering, toxic guilt. You are conditioned to believe this paralysis is a personal defect, a sudden decay of your own willpower. But what if it isn't a failure at all? What if your inability to execute is the calculated, mechanical design of a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure engineered to hunt, exhaust, and devour your potential before you can ever turn it into power? Act 1. The Illusion. We live in an era defined by a strange, quiet paradox. If you look around, you will see a generation of highly ambitious people who genuinely believe they are preparing for greatness. They wake up early. They consume hours of educational podcasts. They buy courses, read summaries of complex books, and watch essays on business strategy, macroeconomics, and self-mastery. They feel a constant, burning desire to build something of value. And crucially, they believe they are acting completely of their own free will. But if you look closer, a troubling pattern emerges. Despite this massive influx of information, actual execution is at an all-time low. The modern ambitious individual spends 90% of their energy preparing to build, and less than 10% actually building. They are trapped in a state of perpetual motion without forward momentum. They believe they are gathering tools. But in reality, they are suffering from an invisible, systemic paralysis. This is not a failure of willpower. It is not standard procrastination. The terrifying truth is much deeper. Your ambition has not been destroyed. It has been perfectly mapped, weaponized, and redirected against you. You are not failing to achieve your goals because you are lazy. You are failing because a highly sophisticated, invisible engine has determined that your unexecuted potential is far more profitable than your actual success. Act 2. The Hidden System. To understand how this happened, we must look beneath the surface at the fundamental resource of the 21st century: attention. We used to live in an economy driven by land, then by industrial manufacturing, and later by capital. Today, we live in the attention economy. In this system, human attention is the primary scarce commodity. This system did not emerge from a grand, malicious conspiracy. It evolved through pure, rational incentives. Tech platforms do not hate your potential. They simply operate on an advertising-based business model. For a platform to survive, it must maximize the time you spend on it. More time equals more ad impressions. More ad impressions equal more revenue. Consider a real-world parallel: the mid-20th century oil boom. Standard Oil didn't care what you did with your car, they just needed you driving so you would burn fuel. Today, tech corporations are the new oil barons, but the resource they are drilling for is the human gaze. In a pure attention market, a user who is offline creating an actual business, writing a book, or deep in focused thought generates exactly $0. A user who is perpetually seeking information about how to do those things generates billions. The market naturally optimized for the highest returning asset. Over the last 2 decades, thousands of the world's brightest engineers, data scientists, and behavioral economists were hired to solve a single problem: how do we keep a human eye glued to a piece of glass for 1 more minute? The system discovered that the easiest way to do this was not by making you passive, but by hijacking your innate desire for progress. It created a marketplace where the feeling of growth could be mass-produced and distributed instantly, completely decoupling the psychological reward of success from the physical effort required to achieve it. Act 3. The Psychology. The bridge between this broad economic system and your daily behavior is a single brain chemical: dopamine. For decades, popular culture mischaracterized dopamine as the chemical of pleasure. It is not. Dopamine is the molecule of anticipation, motivation, and pursuit. It does not fire when you receive a reward, it fires when you anticipate a reward. In nature, this neurochemical architecture evolved to keep us hunting and foraging. The brain calculates a reward prediction error, the difference between what you expect to happen and what actually happens. If you click a link and find an unexpected, deeply insightful piece of information, your brain experiences a positive prediction error. A surge of dopamine commands you, remember what you just did, and do it again. Platforms perfected this by utilizing variable reward schedules, the exact same psychological mechanism that makes slot machines addictive. You do not know which video, article, or post will contain the life-changing insight, so you keep scrolling. More dangerously, for the ambitious brain, the internet exploits our need for cognitive ease. Actual creation is painful. It involves a high probability of failure, intense cognitive load, and delayed gratification. When you watch a video explaining a complex business framework, your brain experiences a simulated sense of mastery. You feel like you are working, but your default mode network, the brain network active during passive rest and daydreaming, is completely unengaged in true problem solving. You have triggered the reward loop of achievement without ever entering the arena of risk. Act 4. The power structure. This psychological exploit creates a highly unique, modern power structure. Historically, power was coercive. Empires controlled populations through physical force, walls, and explicit prohibitions. If a government wanted to stop you from acting, it used the threat of violence. But modern power does not restrict your actions. It shapes your environment until your behavior becomes perfectly predictable, all while leaving you with the absolute conviction that you are entirely free. This is the exact structural control illustrated in the classic film The Truman Show. Truman Burbank believes he is navigating a real world of spontaneous choices. In reality, every street, every conversation, and every dynamic environment is orchestrated by an unseen director to keep him inside the dome. Like Truman, we are no longer obedient subjects forced into compliance, we are self-exploiting participants. The platform does not force you to consume content. Instead, it builds an ecosystem where consumption is the path of least resistance, and creation is an uphill battle against hyper-optimized friction. Advertisers, platforms, and even independent creators are trapped in the same systemic matrix. A creator who makes a deeply nuanced, difficult-to-digest video that requires a user to close the laptop and think for 3 days will be punished by the algorithm. A creator who packages an insight into a hyper-stimulating, easily digestible 10-minute video will be rewarded with massive distribution. Power today is environmental architecture. By controlling the digital infrastructure, the system determines what is visible, what is rewarded, and ultimately, what becomes predictable. Your choices are real, but the menu you are choosing from has been curated with absolute mathematical precision. Act 5. The cost of ambition. When this system interacts with high-potential, ambitious individuals, the results are catastrophic. Ambition is a finite energetic drive. It demands expression. In the past, if you wanted to satisfy your ambition, you had to physically alter your environment, build a business, write a manuscript, master a physical craft. Today, your ambition is systematically intercepted and redirected into a simulated reality of creation. Think of the real-world phenomenon of tutorial hell, experienced by millions of aspiring software engineers and creators. They spend years completing guided projects, collecting certifications, and watching coding tutorials, yet they freeze when staring at a blank text editor. They are trapped because the system has redirected their ambition away from building and toward the loop of passive education. Instead of building a product, the system redirects you to buying a 12-module course on product market fit. Instead of writing a pitch deck, it redirects you to tweaking a digital workspace setup for 4 hours. Instead of facing market rejection, it redirects you to watching a documentary about an elite entrepreneur. This introduces the concept of attentional residue. When you constantly switch between consuming insights, your brain never fully transitions into deep execution. A portion of your cognitive capacity remains anchored to the last piece of information you processed. Over months and years, this constant consumption silently restructures your identity. Attention shapes thoughts, thoughts shape beliefs, beliefs shape identity, and identity drives behavior. Every time you consume content about your goals instead of executing them, you reinforce a dangerous identity loop. I am a person who consumes knowledge, not a person who produces outcomes. Your ambition hasn't been crushed, it has been castrated. You have become structurally weak, fully dependent on the external digital ecosystem to provide the motivation that should naturally generate from your own deep work. Act 6. Escape. Escaping this system cannot be achieved through basic productivity tips. Deleting your apps, turning your phone grayscale, or setting a screen time limit are superficial fixes for a structural problem. They treat the symptom while leaving the invisible architecture intact. To break free, you must implement a completely different operating system for living, based on first principles. Look at how legendary figures structured their isolation. When the writer Maya Angelou wanted to work, she would check into a completely bare hotel room, demanding that the management remove all paintings and decorations from the walls so there was absolutely nothing to compete for her gaze. She understood that protecting her genius required an aggressive rejection of environmental stimuli. The first principle is the production-to-consumption ratio. You must transition from a model of information accumulation to a model of just-in-time learning. Instead of consuming information in the hope that it might be useful later, you must choose a specific, tangible output, and consume only the precise information required to execute the immediate next step. First, establish an informational fast. For the first 4 hours of your day, block all incoming external inputs. No podcasts, news, and educational content. Force your brain to generate its own thoughts from a state of low dopamine stimulation. Second, define an inflexible output target. Set a rule that cannot be broken: zero consumption of content related to your field until you have produced a verifiable, tangible metric of output for that day. Third, reintroduce environmental friction. Make consumption difficult. Use hard, system-level blocks on your devices that require intentional physical effort, or long delay timers to override. Treat your attention as a high-security sovereign asset. True strength in the modern world is not the capacity to absorb more information. It is the radical capability to tolerate information scarcity in exchange for execution depth. The internet is not a library, it is an environment specifically engineered to convert your latent potential into corporate equity. It trains you to be weak by making consumption feel like progress. When you reclaim your attention, you are not merely increasing your productivity. You are reclaiming the architecture of your mind, the trajectory of your ambition, and ultimately, the freedom to determine who you become. The system wins when you watch. You win when you build.